Hello, welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harvey.
And my name is Justin Hill.
If this is the first episode you've listened to in a while and you're wondering where Stephen is, go and listen to our 3-year anniversary episode where you can hear all about it. But the short summary of what's happened is that Stephen has decided, sadly, to step down from the podcast. But you can rejoice, for the wonderful Justin Hill has agreed to take his place, and here he is. Everything else is carrying on just as usual. There will be regular bonus episodes on Patreon every month. And speaking of which, if you'd like to help us with our running costs and get exclusive bonus episodes every month, along with other great perks, check out our Patreon page and consider signing up from as little as £1 per month.
And if you enjoy this episode, please leave us a 5-star review and share our posts on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, and so on to help us get the word out there.
So today's guest is Adam Lofthouse. Adam is the author of action-packed historical fiction set in ancient Rome, such as the Path of Nemesis trilogy and the Enemy of the Empire books. His latest series, The Shadow of Rome, starts with Eagle and the Flame, which I believe is out very soon. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, Adam Lofthouse.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. So, first question up then is when is The Eagle and the Flame actually published, and what's it about? Could you tell us a little bit about the book?
Eagle and the Flame is out on the 30th of July. It's a reissue, so this was previously published as Valencia a couple of years ago. You read it, Matthew? Well, you said you did. You might have read it.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, now you're telling me that it's got a different title. I realise I have read it. I did not realise that it was a reissue.
So, Boltwood Books acquired the rights for some new books from me and some backlist ones as well. So Eagle and the Flame is kind of being reissued at the end of July. It is set in Roman Britain, 4th century, and so kind of latter part of the empire. And it covers what was called the Barbarian Conspiracy. So a coalition of tribes, Saxons, Picts from the north, Scoti from Ireland, all converged on Britain at once, cut the island off from the empire in a year, and no one really quite knows how or why it happened, which makes quite an interesting story and gives me a lot of freedom to kind of make it up as I go along, really, and then invent my own storyline. So yeah, it was a good book to write. I had a lot of fun with it. It was well received when it came out originally. I'm hoping it will be again this time.
Have you made any changes at all, or you've just left it as is?
As is. It got a re-edit, but no major plot changes, nothing like that. It got a good proofread, essentially, which is kind of what I thought it was all it needed, really. The only comment on it, really, was that my editor thought that there was too many named characters. You have secondary characters, and she said, "Why do you give them all names? There's too many names." So I kind of went back through and streamlined that a bit. And there was too many characters called Flavius, which is difficult when the characters based on historical figures and their names were Flavius. And you're kind of trying to explain that, but actually, can't change a guy's name when he's quite a famous historical figure.
Did you manage to sort of call some of the Flaviuses something else, or a nickname, or middle name or surname or something?
You cut it out with the name, yeah. So where they all had 3-barreled names, you just sort of chopped it out for a couple of them and left it in for a couple of them. So just to make it, to be fair, once I'd read it back through, once I'd done it, it did read better and it did make a lot more sense. So
see, it makes a lot more sense to me now, because I read the unedited, the previous version, and I thought everyone was
there was too many Flaviuses.
That was my note to you, wasn't it? Yeah. So who's your editor at Boldwood? Is it Caroline?
No, it's Vic Britton.
Okay.
Caroline was the lady who spoke to me about going over that. But no, I'm with Vic, who's great, to be fair. She's awesome.
Okay, yeah. So for anyone listening, Boldwood Books is a relatively new, or quite a new publisher. And they started, lots of the people that work for Boldwood were originally publishing or were originally working for an imprint at Head of Zeus, where I was being published.
Yeah.
So Caroline was my editor for the first few books in Head of Zeus. And the first one I published with them, first couple were self-published first, and then they did, like you say, a light edit, and we republished. So that wasn't Boldwood, but it's the same sort of process as you're going through. And I know we've got lots of aspiring writers and published writers that listen to the podcast, and I'm sure they're always interested in the process of publishing. And sort of, so, understanding the paths and the different paths available to writers to get published. So, can you tell us a little bit about how, I think you started off as self-published, right? You've been with a couple of different publishers.
No,
and now you've ended
I
up
started off with what's now called Loom Books. I still have 3 books with them. So my first book was The Centurion Son, which was published to literally no acclaim in November 2017. So that Loom Books were called Endeavour Press or something at the time.
Was that
Endeavour
a splintering of some other publishers? Was it? I seem to remember Endeavour and Loom all coming out of. Was it Sharp Books as well? Came out.
Yeah. They all. There's 2 guys and they split, I think. But I think it was one company when I started with them.
Right. Okay.
Back in 2017. And then it became Endeavour Media, and they split. One of them stayed with Endeavour Media, one of them did Sharp Books, and then Joff Books bought Endeavour Media, and it became Loom Books, or maybe it became Loom Books first. I don't know. Every year something changes, it seems. So yeah, I had 3 books with them anyway. I did a trilogy with them, and then I self-published after that because I was curious.
Okay.
More than anything. Self-published 3 books. 3 books? 4 books. 4 books, sorry. 4 books. And was probably about this time last year, maybe a little bit before, about to self-publish my next one, because I was kind of quite happy doing that, really. When Boldwood got in touch, and Caroline phoned me, and Caroline's sales pitch was, I launched Matthew Harvey's career. Joking.
Really?
Name of renown.
I said, God, you did do a very good job, did you?
Yeah.
He's doing some dodgy podcast now.
He's got a podcast for a living.
Yeah, he's desperate to make ends meet. Yeah, and it just seemed like a good opportunity, actually. I was kind of aware of who they were and what they were doing. And the experience with them so far has been really, really good. So, yeah.
Has it been nice to go back from self-publishing into a kind of publishing house and having people do things for you?
That is. So I think my one frustration with self-publishing is my time to write is fairly limited. And I think I spend a lot of time doing other stuff, around self-publishing, rather than actually I just need to write 1,000 words because I've got other stuff to do and I need to do my work out for the day, etc., etc. Whereas, with Boldwood, I can just write, and when it's done, you send it off. A couple of months later, you get your edits back, and then a week or 2 later, you send them back. And then you get your copy edits. A week later, you send them back. Proofread, same thing again. It's just so much easier.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, it's been really, really good so far. Really positive.
I mean, it's interesting because we've heard, quite a few Boldwood authors now. We've had a few on the show, and obviously I worked with Caroline before and some of the other people that work there, I think, as well. And I've heard only good things. I've heard only positive things about them, and I think it's very interesting. To any authors listening, the aspiring authors, it can be very, very different depending on which publishing house you're with. I mean, some will really get behind you, and obviously the contracts are all very, very different as well. And you can be on different percentages of royalties, and some will give you an advance, some won't give you an advance on the royalties. All these different things, but on top of all of that, you've also got, because you can potentially sign a great deal and think, wow, this is brilliant. I'm getting a reasonable advance, and then not have any, very little done for the book beyond that advance and then sort of never earn out the royalties. So there's all sorts of different options. And I think we'd all agree that would be the best thing is when the publishers are actually doing something and trying to get your books out there and sold.
Oh yeah, and they're brilliant at that. I think the experience I'm having now compared to what I had back in 2017 to 2020 is chalk and cheese.
Yeah,
it's completely different. Even like you email someone to ask a question and they actually reply. It's just stupid things like that. You just think, oh god, they've replied already. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And they answer my question. It's just little things, isn't it? I think it's not.
Yeah. You often feel that in publishing, kind of the least important people are the writers, in the mindset of the publishers.
That's definitely a feeling every now and again. You do feel like you're at the bottom of the food chain, as opposed to thinking, well, if without the supply of the content that that we're creating, there would be no industry. But I guess they know that unless you are a massive megastar writer, if you got pissed off and just walked away, somebody else would step into your shoes very, very quickly. So they know that really we are, to some extent, at the bottom of the food chain. It's a weird thing. And for me, one of the biggest complications of the whole publishing industry is the fact that you have this thing of creativity and artistry mixing with business. And so those two things come into really stark contrast, and it's quite a difficult thing to balance, I think, those two sides of the coin.
So Adam, the whole Roman Empire is a pretty huge subject. How do you, when you're thinking about, you've quite a few stories in now already, when you're thinking about a new book or a new story, how do you decide on where to place it and what the subject matter is going to be?
Originally, when I wrote my first book, I specifically picked something that no one else had written about before, or an event that no one had written about before. You think of all the authors that write Roman historical fiction. I mean, we could sit here for an hour and just list them. And I had kind of grown up reading them, and I just thought, well, I can't do something that a Ben Kane has done, or a Connie Woodden has done, or a Simon Turney, or Gordon Dossey, whoever. So I picked something specifically that no one else had done, and I thought, okay, that's my little bit there. If I do that, so that was why I picked the kind of the time frame for the Centurion Son. It was set in something called the Marcomannic War in the 2nd century AD. And then with the Eagle and the Flame books, again, kind of quite similar. Late Roman Empire, not as often written about. I kind of found it a bit more interesting as well. Maybe it's because I kind of been researching classical age Rome for 10 odd years now. That moving on and doing a different era was exciting. It was different. It was fresh. You've kind of got the rise of Christianity. You've got this kind of waning empire that's slowly decaying and falling apart, and everyone seems to know it's falling apart. No one knows how to fix it. There's civil wars every year. There's new emperors every other year. No emperor dies of natural causes, pretty much after Augustus, the first one anyway. It's just chaos, and it's great fun, right? There's loads of opportunities, loads of stories. But the very first book I tried to write before I wrote The Centurion Son was about the Battle of Adrianople, however you say it, which kind of takes place at the same time as Eagle and the Flame, but in the Eastern Empire. And the book I tried to write was awful, but I still had a lot of the research material, I still have it now, but that I had 10, 11 years ago. So I kind of dug that out again and was reading back through that. And that's when I came across the Barbarian Conspiracy. I think it's just little things you can pick at. For me, it's just picking one event and just saying, right, that's what I'm kind of writing about, and I will build my story around that one event.
Yeah, Bernard Cornwell talks about the big picture and the small picture, or the big story and the small story. And he talks about the small story is what you write sort of on top of the big story. So the big story is the battle of whatever, but the small story is, Sharp doing his thing, or in your case, whoever your characters are, doing around the major fall of an emperor or whatever. So you talked about that you researched a lot, and we know research is a huge part of writing historical fiction. Um, and you also mentioned that you've written some books around the second century CE or AD. What books would you recommend for someone looking to write a novel set in Rome in the second century AD? Someone particularly interested in how people lived and what life was really like in the city of Rome at the apogee of imperial power. I'm just asking for a
That is
friend.
a specific question.
Yeah.
I'm going to look behind me. There's a few. So if you want to write about the military, you've got to get The Complete Roman Army by Adrian Goldsworthy. It's literally like a Bible.
Okay.
Anything you need to know is in that. And then there is.
He's wandered
I'm
off.
try and pronounce the author's name. I'm back. I'm coming back.
Oh, he's off
24
to
Hours
the...
in Ancient Rome is very good.
Oh, I've got it. Yeah.
That's really good for
But
kind of the
that's good though.
day-to-day civilian life in ancient Rome.
Can you try and
Kind of
pronounce the
away
name of
from
the
military.
author?
No,
Because
I won't. His first name's Philip, and that's all you need.
yeah,
Just Google that. The rest will come up. Macisak?
yeah, I don't know. It looks maybe Polish. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But,
I've got a couple of books by him, and they're both very good actually.
is the other one about how to live for a day in Rome on 5 denarii a day or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that. And there's lots of other good ones. L.J. Trafford wrote a really, really good book, Section Sensuality in Ancient Rome. That's very, very good. Quite. It's very different to a kind of military historical lecture what I'd write, but again,
that's
it
for the
paints a very
small
good
story.
picture.
Yeah.
Paints a very good picture of the time.
Okay, I have to get that then. Yes, there could be soon another Jaffra. You heard the expression of the Jaffras?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting involved, are you?
Well, don't know. Maybe just one. I'm not gonna. I can't imagine writing a massive saga or series. But I've got you know how it is. You was talking about little things, that sort of your little ideas. I've got an idea. I'm thinking maybe, yeah. So watch this space.
I suppose there's two ways of writing a novel: a kind of a planner or a pantser. So you've got your idea. Do you sit down and plan it out, or you just kind of start and see where the story gets you?
I'm very much a pantser. I will go and I will follow wherever my characters are leading me. I know how it will start. I know how it will end. How you get there, I'm quite leaving quite open, and that's the fun as well. I think if you planned it all to a T, I think it takes a lot of the enjoyment out of writing it. And I definitely get why people do that, because I write myself into all sorts of plot holes and have to go back and fix it, and the time I waste is criminal, really. But it is much more enjoyable overall, I find.
It's almost like you're the first reader of the book.
Yes.
So if you're not excited
absolutely.
to sit down and start writing and find out what happens.
100%.
Yeah, we've talked about this quite a few times. I'm definitely a plotter, but with pantser tendencies.
I have tried to thoroughly plot a book before, but I found that I stopped going back to look at what I planned once I started, and I just went off on all these different.
Well, yeah, I do that as well, but
it was quite entertaining once I got to the end to go back and read through my plan and go, this is not the book I planned out at all what I've written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess it helps you to work through all the ideas and the plot points. At least gives you a kind of alternate story. Maybe isn't as good as one you ended up with.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I plot at the macro level and sort of start drilling down, but when I actually get to the micro level of writing, I've not planned every single scene, and and when I'm actually writing, people will do things that I'm not expecting. I haven't thought about. And sometimes they're things that throw a spanner in the works completely, or you think, oh my goodness, where did that come from? And somebody
what I'm working on at the minute, I've given myself an historical timeline because quite a lot happens, and I want to make sure I get the right stuff in. So I will kind of keep that with me as I'm writing at the minute, just to make sure I don't leave anything out. But my central character isn't a historical figure, so I can have him doing whatever I want him to do, really, and I'll have a bit of fun along the way, making it up as I go along, putting
And
him through his paces.
how constrained are you by facts? I remember Bernard Cornwell in one of his Uhtred books talking about he moves the date of a battle because it just fits his story better. And I felt a bit cheated by that, but I don't know, how would you take that? Are you a kind of history lesson or
I don't know. Uhtred
story?
was about 112 by the end of that series, anyway, wasn't he? I don't know. Being propped up.
Yeah.
No,
and if you haven't heard, he's writing a new one. He told us on the podcast last year he started a new one. Yeah,
not a prequel.
I don't know if it's a prequel. I'm assuming not, but who knows? Maybe it's with his son, because it would still be an Uhtred novel because his son's called Uhtred, isn't he? I think so.
Yeah, that's true.
But I don't know.
There
but
can't
yeah, he did say
there can't be another one. No, I think I tend to leave it as it is. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've kind of moved anything or cheated my way out of anything in any way so far. No, I think I would, especially if it was quite a well-known, say, a battle or something, I would leave it where it is and make sure it fits into my story where I need it to.
Yeah. It is quite difficult sometimes when you've got quite a complicated timeline, like you were saying, and you've got things of your small story on top that you're trying to tell and get everything intertwined. Yes. I think that's, at the moment, I'm struggling with some of that, because some of the decisions that are made historically that take place don't make any sense, and you're thinking, well, why did this happen? Yes. Why did they go to that place? Yeah. Or why did they end up in this castle besieged, whatever it was? And you think, that doesn't make any logical sense, but obviously it happened, because we know from the historical record that these events happen. But it's very difficult, and I suppose that's part of the joy of historical fiction. You're trying to come up with a plausible reason for it, but sometimes it becomes very difficult to actually make it seem at all plausible.
Yeah, that's true.
And often it's almost, you've got to see it through your character's points of view, because although we know the history and we know what happens, for them, they're living in the world and have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. They have their cares, loves, lives that consume them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And they can make incredibly stupid mistakes. Yeah. They can do stupid things.
Yeah. And I think that's important when you put in historical details in as well, is you only put in what they know. If you're just writing about a common soldier on a front line, he doesn't know what's happening with an emperor in Rome, say, or something in the East, or things like that. I always try and make sure they're not kind of really bogged down in facts that don't need to be in there.
Yeah. It's interesting.
If my character won't know it, then it doesn't go in,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As a writer, it's and as a reader, I suppose you're interested in all those facts that you've got a lot of facts in your head, and so sometimes it's difficult to avoid trying to explain what's happening in the bigger context.
Yeah.
But well, we talked a bit about action and adventure, and the fact that your books, like mine and lots of Justin's, not most, I don't know, most of yours, I suppose, are all sort of, you've got action and stuff going on, haven't they, Justin? Lots of historical action and adventure writers do tend to accumulate weapons. You can see I've got my axe back there in the background. You can even see my shiny helmet if you look closely, Adam.
I am flanked by two shiny helmets sitting.
Yeah. Well, that was my question. Do you have any weapons and things like that, and armor? And have you got any hands-on experience with things like that? Have you ever been to any reenactments?
No hands-on experience. I have a classical Roman legionary's helmet, and I have a 5th century Roman legionary's helmet. I have a 5th century Roman shield on the wall. So this is a desktop, not a laptop. I can't really move it. And I've got an umbrella stand full of swords. I have 3 swords.
So the answer is yes. You've accumulated quite a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
more things than you have books.
I did
It
go
is
through
great
a
though.
phase of being a bit obsessed with it, and now I just think when I'm like, excuse the phrase, polishing my helmet, I just think, oh God, why have I bought this? Why do I have to keep doing this? Don't want it to go rusty. What have I got it?
You
And
love
yeah,
it.
I did go through a little phase where I was like obsessed with getting my hands on stuff.
Do you go to any
It is quite
reenactments?
good.
Do you go to any reenactments to see Roman guys, legionaries beating
I
each
have
other up?
once. I saw something at Richmond Fort, which is fairly close to where I live down in Kent. But that's the only one. I need to go up and I need to go to York for their yearly festival. I need to do a bit more really, but I haven't as of yet.
Yeah. Is that in the summer, the York one?
It is, yeah. I think it's just happened actually a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
It's kind of late spring, early summer.
Was that the one that
It,
I saw some photos on people's feeds that they built like a cardboard forum? Was that or a
yes, they
temple or
did.
something?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was
they did.
it looked amazing.
Problem is, my two youngest boys, their birthdays are only 2 days apart, and that always clashes with their birthdays every year. Always seems to kind of clash, so I feel a bit bad just abandoning
Well, you got to get them
abandoning
into the
it.
Roman stuff and take them with you and say,
Well,
"Look, we're going to go to this, boys. You're going to love this."
I don't think they'd be up for it, if I'm being honest. They're a bit young. They're a bit young still.
Yeah, a
Maybe
couple
in
of
a
And
few
years.
years.
did you always want to write about the Romans? Was there any other periods you were interested in?
Not really. I I was going on holiday when I was like 16, 17. I was buying a few books at the airport and I bought Excalibur by Bernard Cornwell. Didn't know it was the third in the trilogy. Didn't know anything about it, just the way quite a cool looking cover.
Got a
Picked it
sword on
up.
the front.
Yeah, read it about 3 times in 2 weeks, was totally obsessed with it. When I got back to the UK, immediately went and bought the first two. And then once I'd kind of flown through them, I was in a Waterstones looking for another book to read like this. And then Con Iggulden's Gates of Rome
Mm.
was on a shelf. It had a quote from Bernard Cornwell on the front. So I thought, right, I'll buy that. And I flew through those, and that's been Rome ever since, really.
That's
So it's
interesting, though. So just
quite late for me. So it's about 16, 17, yeah.
Yeah.
no, but it's great. It's great proof that the endorsements do work, though, because I think
Yeah,
sometimes I think writers get asked, quite often we get asked to provide endorsements for cover quotes for people,
yeah.
and I think there's a sort of school of thought that it doesn't really matter, nobody reads those things, but obviously every now and again
I did.
it does
Yeah.
definitely tip the needle
Yeah.
one way or another. I think sometimes you might pick up a book and think, "Oh, I don't like that guy. I'm not going to." Maybe the quote could work against you. But I think in general it helps. And sometimes if you're like a massive fan of the person who's written the endorsement, I think definitely that helps.
Yeah,
Yeah. What a
yeah,
great intro.
100%.
Bernard Cornwell and Con Iggulden. I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
starting
pretty high standards to try and match up to,
terrific
aren't they, really?
storytellers. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And once I'd flown through the 4 or 5 com books, it was anything else Roman. Yeah, anything I could get my hands on. Simon Scarrow and Ben Kane and Tony Riches, so on, so on, and so on, and so on. And then I just spent years reading nothing but Roman historical fiction, really.
Yeah. And
And
is there any other
now,
periods that
now I can't stand reading anything Roman.
really?
Honestly, just have no interest at all in it anymore.
Oh no.
Particularly fiction, because I just think like you kind of know. Oh, I've written a book about this. Would you mind reading it? I've seen it, but I know what happens. Well, you
Yeah.
know what's going
It's
to happen
kind
at
of
the
the
end.
day
I've even
job.
started it. Yeah,
So what do you read then? Other historical stuff or?
I read a lot of historical stuff. Yeah, I don't read a lot of Roman, but a lot of historical stuff. To be fair, I've read a lot more fantasy than I do historical fiction these days. Quite a lot more. I think I just enjoy the fact that it's very different to what I write, and I just find it a lot more enjoyable. Really,
Mm.
I don't know. I do still read some historical fiction. I mean, I've got a huge bookcase full of a mixture of it there. But I think at the minute I'm reading much more fantasy than I am hisfic. What about you guys? Do you still read a lot of historical?
I probably don't. I read probably more non-fiction historical stuff, and I try to.
Yeah, same.
I'll read sort of genres that are maybe adjacent to historical fiction, if that makes sense. I don't know, like I don't know, not swords and sandals kind of historical, but maybe things set in the 1950s or maybe 100 years ago or something, which doesn't feel the same as reading historical fiction set in the Roman period
Yeah.
or in the Anglo-Saxon period. So really, I read recently a book by Joe Lansdale. I love Joe Lansdale's books, and I'm still going through his back catalogue. And he's written westerns and sci-fi and horror and all sorts. And it's, I can't remember what it's called, The Thin Dark Line. This book was. It was set in 1950s Texas, and it was all about racism and stuff. And it really, really, really brilliant, excellent. And it is historical, but it feels much closer to home.
Very different to what we write, though. Yeah.
I think it's true that I don't read much Viking or Anglo-Saxon fiction anymore. I think again, it's kind of if it's your work, then it does take away some of the kind of the thrill of it. But I do whenever I go on holiday, I love ancient Greeks. So whenever I go on holiday, I always take a couple of Stephen Pressfield or I forget the woman who wrote the Song of Achilles and Caroline Miller.
Madeline Miller.
Madeline, yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good. I've got them. Yeah.
She's very good.
Great book. Yeah.
I have a ancient Greek story in me, so
I think
kind of
I
like
do
research.
as well, I'd like to do ancient Greek. I'd like to do Troy.
Okay.
I would love to do a couple of books on Troy at some point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to. Well, David Gemmell did it.
Yeah, David Gemmell did it. They're brilliant. Yeah.
I've recently revisited them on audio. So I read them years ago, but I use audio a lot to revisit books that I've read a long time ago and loved that I don't really have time to reread. And they were so good. I was just finding excuses to go out for a drive just so I could chuck it on for 15, 20 minutes, I found them really inspiring actually listening to them for the second time.
Yeah, David Gemmell's always
definitely like to do.
Always great to go back to any David Gemmell, really. I every now and again I'll listen to a David Gemmell audiobook, like you say, or books that I've read before. Or some, to be fair, some I can't remember if I read before, because I remember the sort of tentpole ones, big ones like Legend that I definitely know I've read that multiple times. Other ones I'll think, have I read this one? And I'll listen to it and I think, I'm still not sure, because they're kind of it's a little bit like reading a Louis L'Amour book or something like a Western. They follow some sort of similar structure each time and similar sort of characters, but they're all great. His writing's brilliant.
Yeah, I'd often find myself because I had a new cover and I'd read the blurb at the back and think, oh, I don't recognize that. And then as soon as I started page one, I was like, okay, I've read this before. Actually, funny enough, I got all the David Gemmell for my sons. And the story I'm reading now to my youngest son is David Gemmell, one of the Waylander novels. I think it must be one of the last ones. I can't remember the name of it, to be honest. But we're near the end now, where all the storylines are coming together.
He's a great storyteller. He's a brilliant storyteller.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I remember, because here's a full disclosure for everybody watching or listening. We, Justin, me, and Adam, have all met face to face on more than one occasion, different occasions. Yeah. And
we're meeting in Bath this year, aren't we? Is it still
potentially? Oh, yeah. Gosh, I've got to organise that, haven't I? So we've met a couple of times in London for like a Viking Age writers get together for Christmas lunch, organised by Theo Brunn. But Adam somehow managed to inveigle himself into the group, even though he writes Roman stuff. I don't know how. I think
late Romans.
I think if I organise the next get together, you'll be off, Adam. You're not invited. Only Vikings.
Right. Where's the link?
Adam and I
I'm getting out of there.
Adam and I were last men standing in the last Christmas.
Yeah, we were.
Well, and I remember And that's because I had to get the train back. Let's not cast aspersions here. But I remember in a conversation. I think I remember. Maybe I was drunk. I'm not sure. That you used to play football at quite a high level.
Well, not really.
Adam, didn't
I've
you?
got
Didn't you actually play for England?
England.
Didn't you
No.
like the under 18s or
How
under?
drunk was I?
You
Might have
must have been very
embellished that.
drunk. I don't know.
Well, to be fair, the last time we were in London, I was a right old state by the time
Maybe it was that. So
well,
so
I was in quite a bad way. Justin
were
was propping me up at some weird old pub that we were in.
It was strange. Yeah.
So, but you were a keen footballer.
I used to be. Yeah, I've got a metal ankle now and a dodgy knee, so it's a bit difficult these days.
Right.
I struggle to keep up with my kids in the garden anymore. But
so how do you think the experience of playing football, if at all, translates into your writing?
Oh, I don't know if it did really. I mean, there's just something about the sort of camaraderie of a team or a squad, a bit of dressing room banter that you'd get in a barracks block in any modern day barracks block now. I would have thought.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Doesn't it? Yeah, but I think I kind of get that in my place of work as well, and you're all in it together, and it's one team, and you take the mick out of each other, don't you? And you do what you need to do to get yourselves through the day. So I think things like that kind of come quite naturally to me when I'm writing. I'd much prefer to write about a common soldier than I would an emperor or a high-ranking officer of some sort. I think that the common soldiery are much more fun, and you can put them you can throw them into a lot more varied and dangerous situations, and then try and see how they're going to get through it. So I would always stick with them. Yeah.
Well, you like the common man. You have a lot more leeway, don't you, when someone who's not in the historical record so much?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I always have central characters that aren't. They're always my creation, and then you can always sort of weave them into your story, and then they can have their own, their own lives and their own hardships, battles to fight as the historical backdrop that you've picked kind of plays out in the background.
Yeah. Well, we're coming towards the end of our time together, but we've got a couple of questions left to ask you. And before we move on to the very last question, which is an exclusive question for our patrons on Patreon, I would like to ask you, what are you working on at the moment? And if you'd like to plug, any upcoming books apart from the book, well, you could plug again the books that you've got coming up very soon. And what else are you working on? What else is coming up?
So I've got another Enemy of the Empire book out in November, which is an actual new book, not a reissue, which is exciting. I've been working on the structural edits for it today. It should finish tomorrow morning. So that's out in November.
What's the title of that one?
Warlord at the minute. It's a Bernard Cornwell rip-off from Willowworth. But it fit the story. I'm going with it. I don't think he's going to worry. I don't think it's going to bother him.
He'll be all right. Yeah, he'll survive.
You can just see it. Big, strong, big letters.
Yeah.
Right across the top.
Yeah, he'll be fine. I'm not expecting a phone call. So that's out in November, and then next year I've got the Shadow of Rome books 2, 3, and 4 will all be out. One in February, one in June, one in October, and November.
Are those all new, or are they reissues?
Number 2 is a reissue. Number 3 is new and it's written, and number 4 is what I was saying earlier about planning out a historical timeline. That's kind of where I'm up to with that. So once these structural edits are out of the way, I can make a start on that, which would be good. Hopefully get that. Well, that will be done this year and ready to go.
That's the
that's the
life of the writer, juggling structural edits and working out the plot of the book that's coming out a year from now. And
yeah, I think where I've had some reissue books as well, it just feels like every week another edit hits my inbox, and I'm like, oh god, another one.
And do you enjoy the editing process, or
no? No, I'd much rather be writing.
Yeah, the
I think
creative spark.
the structural edit I'm just finishing has kind of been the most intense one I've had to do as a writer so far, just in terms of the work that it needed. And it did need some work, and I was aware of that when I sent it off. I said it's not, but I'd run out of time. I was on my deadline to see it's not quite where I wanted it to be, but you know, here we are. It's deadline day, so. But
Here you
it's
go.
good having that kind of 2-3 weeks of not looking at it every day. I needed that. I think sometimes you need a bit of a break from it, don't you?
Yeah.
And you're kind of a bit more refreshed when you go back to it.
Absolutely. That's interesting, about the editing thing, because I think that I prefer writing. I've always thought that I prefer writing to editing, but more recently, I think actually my favorite part of the process is doing the very initial edits, like my own
Yes,
internal edits. I
but
think
that's
that's
different.
my
I
yeah, I know, but I
enjoy
think
that.
that's I think
Yeah,
that's the part that I probably enjoy most, because it's like the structure of the
it's
scene or the chapter or the book is there as I think it should be, and then I can polish that and make it better. But then, once it goes to like structural edits and they come back and say, we want you to delete this chapter or move this chapter around or get rid of that character, well, that's like, oh no, please don't
so
do
that's
this to
what
me.
I've had a bit of at the minute. So the book that I sent off has kind of flashbacks, but they want to move to different parts of the book. But after the flashback, it's kind of then mentioned, and then you have to move the bit where it's been mentioned. And I was doing that today, and by 2 o'clock, I couldn't stop yawning. It was just quite draining. It's just sitting here reading it all on the screen. I just sort of can't look at the screen anymore. I'm done.
And you sort of
I'm
start
waiting
thinking
for
that you
now.
could do a find or replace, or you could just sort of do a search, and then but it doesn't find
And you
everything, because
can't.
sometimes you
No.
refer to the named character as the woman or whatever, and then you miss it completely, and it's terrible.
Yeah.
So you've got to read it, or you can't just hope for the best.
Yesterday, I tried to do a search for all on the word old, because I was just looking at how many times I refer to my main character as being old and a bit past it, and I thought we needed to cut him down a little bit. But then obviously everything like told and hold and cold and all that comes up, and I just thought, oh, this isn't any quicker.
Yeah.
I don't want to be looking at this. I just want the word old. No, I find that quite tiresome and quite draining, to be fair.
I think you can actually change the set. If you're searching in Word, you can actually say to search for the whole word only in the parameters. Yeah, you can. Yeah,
well,
just drop that into your. Just to give you a little bit of extra tool there for you. You've learned something. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I'll say that.
Yeah, I find when you're in the kind of late stage editing, you essentially holding the whole book in your head of all the kind of storylines and the beats and the points the characters are at, and it's a hell of a lot to you can ears start steaming, it takes a lot of kind of mental effort to get through that.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I always find that there's a character who is kind of in the first third and they just sort of disappear. And I've had that 3 or 4 times now. I just think I need to give this guy an ending, or he needs to be in the rest of the book, or he needs to. Where does he go? He's just vanished. But that's where me being a pantser comes back at me. Doesn't do me any favors, I guess.
Yeah. So, as our patron exclusive question, every few months we mix together a compilation of advice from different authors we've interviewed and provide that as a bonus episode. So, what do you wish you knew before you started out that you know now? And what are some of the best pieces of advice you would give aspiring authors?
What do I know now? I wish I knew when I started out. I wish I knew more about how book contracts worked. I know it's not necessarily about writing, but now I know that the first 2 contracts.
Well, thanks ever so much for coming on, Adam, and for being the first guest we've had on with just me and Justin together. So at the start of a new era of Rock, Paper, Swords. And it's been great having you on. So thanks ever so much, and best of luck with all your new books that you've got coming out, all the millions of books.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to be rivaling NJ Porter soon for proficiency in chucking them out there, I think. That's my aim.
She's a number of series going, so you have to...
she's a machine. Absolutely.
Cranks them out.
That's incredible, yeah. And, well, maybe hopefully I'll organise something for this Christmas get together, and we'll get you and MJ and Justin. We'll all get you somewhere, whether it's Bath or London or wherever we end up deciding to meet up. But I need to put that in my calendar. I need to remind myself now to organise something as we get closer. But yeah, thanks a lot for coming on.
No worries. Thank you for having me. I'll see you both soon.
Well, that's it for today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to leave a review and subscribe to this podcast. Thanks to all of our patrons, and a special shout out to our Patreon producers, Adam Turner, Ben Mayer, Andy Maxwell, Ben Fox, Daryl Hare, and George Johnson.
You can sign up on Patreon to support us from as little as £1 per month, or buy us a beer at the link tree in the show notes.
Until next time on Rock, Paper, Swords, it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harvey.
And it's goodbye from me, Justin Hill.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind,
stay safe,
and happy reading.